你要操纵吧，还是去看啊，他要是不是
All right, yeah. Let me just make sure everyone's here. There's a lot more people than I expected to come, but yeah. Hey guys, I'm Jason Fang. Before we even start, I would just like to make sure that everyone mutes themselves so we can, hear Henry, give his amazing presentation. But yeah, hey guys, I think we can commence the meeting. But yeah, hello everyone, and thank you for attending the Zoom session on this fine afternoon. Make sure to follow us on Instagram for updates meeting like these at Hooch Advisory Club, and join our Remind for important updates by texting at HoochADV. So yeah, I know many of you are from Chattahoochee High School, but this webinar was open to all, and I would first like to thank my officer team, Pramod, Ben, Nicole, and Monis, and Daniel for being a great officer team.
Okay, you guys have weird perceptions. It's not
Before I can start, I would like everyone to mute themselves. I don't think people got the memo for muting themselves, but I'll just continue. But I would like to thank my mom for sending out the message to the WeChat group to get all these people. I didn't expect this many people. There's currently 84 people in the lobby. And lastly, I would like to give a big shout out to my boy, Henry Schwan, for even accepting this. I contacted him over Instagram. He didn't leave me on red. I'm grateful for that. But if you aren't from Chattahoochee or have no idea who I am, I'm Jason Fang. I'm currently a junior at Chattahoochee and the founder of Hooch Advisory Club, which is the goal is to help students like us learn from established people to, have a greater experience in high school and to make sure that we succeed in not only high school or college, but, beyond that. I know a lot of pressure is, get into Ivy League school, get great GPA score, SAT score, but I think it's more than that. And, if you have a good work ethic and, learn from great experiences like Henry, then yeah, you'll succeed in high school and beyond. But yeah, without further ado, I just want to, introduce my guy, Henry Schwan. This guy is, the perfect guy, bro. I contacted him over Instagram. He went to Lambert and was accepted in the likes of Princeton and Harvard. But the format of this meeting is that Henry will give a short, presentation, and after that, we'll open the floor for some Q&A. But without further ado, Henry, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Jason, and thank you for the invitation. I gave a webinar a couple months ago, and I told people if they had questions, hit me up on Instagram, and that I will reply. I don't leave people on red, and I think Jason can back me up on that. First things first, before I dive into anything, I do just want to quickly apologize for my background. This is actually my little sister's room. And so I went on my gap year program and she compromised and she took over my room. So I am stuck here for the next 3 weeks. So if you see all those Legos or the posters on the wall, not mine, guys, not mine. But with that said, I guess the structure I kind of want to dive into for the next 15 minutes-ish is talking about one, kind of my experience in high school and how did I make the most out of every single opportunity and how did I pursue those opportunities per se. And then I'll dive into kind of my experience with the college application process and some of my main takeaways and some of my main regrets, I'll say, of that process. And in the last 20 minutes-ish, I'll open it up for Q&A and I'll let Jason facilitate that. So with that said, let's start off with my high school experience. Just on a very surface level, the main activities I was involved with were the Future Business Leaders of America, which it's the abbreviation is FBLA. We have student governments, and we have the speech and debate club. I was also sports-wise, I ran cross country for 3 years. And I went to several summer programs and did a couple internships throughout my years in high school that I can talk about in a second. But I guess on a macro level, all of my activity kind of revolved around leadership and it revolved around service to others. And that was something that I was very interested in. That's something that just was very natural for me going into high school. And that's kind of my first suggestion for you guys is don't try to force yourself into something that is not natural for you. Analyze what it is that you're good at, what it is that you're passionate about, and pursue activities that fall in line with what those things are. And for me, I think taking the suggestions from parents and reading a lot and having conversations with people who are older than you have been very immensely helpful for me. My parents, obviously, I grew up with them, and they kind of knew me best. You know, they knew what I was good at. They knew what I could be good at, and they kind of like pointed me in the general right direction. But then after that, they allowed me the space to kind of go into and dive deeper myself. And for me, that next part of talking to upperclassmen and having those conversations from like hearing their perspectives of how their high school experience was like with student council or with FBLA or HOSA, you know, which is the healthcare version, a healthcare organization. When I heard about HOSA, I was like, that sounds really cool, but I don't really think that fits me and fits my personality. And, you know, I don't think healthcare is something I want to get into. But just having those conversations with people who have been through the process and have specifically been through the process at the school or the high school that you've been at was really, really helpful. And just a quick disclaimer, I'm not exactly sure what the age range of people here are. I'm going to speak generally from the freshman, sophomore, and then to the junior, senior perspective later on. So with that said, that was kind of my mindset going into high school. When I actually entered high school, taking advantage of those opportunities really came down to yourself and your own abilities. But it doesn't have to be, is what I realized, is that people want to help you, especially upperclassmen and especially advisors. But you have to kind of convince them to help you. And that's where building solid connections and building up your network really comes into play, of reaching out to those advisors early on, as early as possible. And that's something I did especially with FBLA. That was my main experience. We had something called Freshman Festival, which was when you were in 8th grade, all the 8th graders were able to tour the high school that you're going to, and you're able to talk to teachers, talk to advisors, talk to upperclassmen. Some call it the club fair. There's a lot of different names. I highly recommend everyone here to take full advantage of that opportunity because that's what I did, and that gave me a huge head start in FBLA at least. You know, I approached the advisor after the intro session, and I just kind of, you know, introduced myself. It was nothing special really, but it was more the fact that I was the only 8th grader, because 8th graders, you know, typically most of us are pretty shy about that, especially talking to like adults. It doesn't really come easily. But I really pushed myself to like get out of that comfort zone and just introduce myself. And the mere fact that an 8th grader approached a rising senior and an advisor and an adult at the time just really stood out to them. So when I went into 9th grade and when I had applied to be a 9th grade officer, they remembered me from back then. I also kind of looked like one of the state presidents at the time, which kind of helped a little. I'm not sure if they were playing the stereotype card or whatever it was, but anyways, like it helped. It went in my favor. But they remembered me, and in turn, I'm not saying that helped me win the election, but it couldn't have hurt me, right? And that same mindset of just putting myself out there and trying to build connections with people who have been through the process and people who are in charge has kind of led me. That's been like kind of my philosophy with every single organization I have joined. And going into Harvard next year, that's still going to be my philosophy of, you know, I don't have to do this on my own. There are people out there who are more than happy to help you. But you have to be careful about this because there is a difference between being too objective and just approaching them to be like, yo, can you help me with this? Versus really building up that connection first. And then naturally, they'll be the ones to be like, hey, do you want help with this? You know, it's a very, very different situation. One is forced, one is not. One is, you know, approved, another is frowned upon. So just be genuine with that process of really wanting to be their friends and really wanting to get to know them for who they are, rather than kind of using them for that connection, for that resource, and for that kind of relationship. So that's my first kind of advice, I would say, for taking advantage of opportunities in high school. The second thing I would say is that your activity, and this is kind of for the more juniors and seniors, the long-term college application mindset, is that there has to be a fine line between having your activities come together versus being well-rounded. And I was watching a video by RP Park. He's a Stanford junior right now. And something that he said is that he calls it a spike versus being well-rounded. And I think the stereotype in that a lot of parents say that to get into an Ivy League college, you have to be well-rounded. You have to do 20 million different activities. You have to be good at every single thing you do. A lot of kids I see nowadays are taking like 20 different after-school classes. And I'm not saying that's a problem, but I'm saying that there's limitations to that, right? I think that I've seen a lot of my friends firsthand get burnt out from that process. So be careful with that and just kind of know what your limitations are. But from a college point of view, that can actually come off as kind of a disadvantage for you. And I just want to encourage everyone to put yourself in the mindset of a college admission officer. Because especially for Ivy League colleges, everyone who applies is, they got the grades somehow. They must be somehow like decently involved in extracurricular activities. So how do you really distinguish the good from the greats? And the answer for me really just comes down to how you package your application, how you sell yourself during the application. And that starts, I think, with the extracurriculars that you do in high school. What do I mean by that? So, and I can send the video to anyone who wants to watch it afterwards. In the video, he talks about how his package revolved around this theme of sharing. And he did activities such as photography, video editing, art. And in all three of those aspects, he was sharing something, whether it be through, and he also did speech. So he shared his word, he shared pictures, and he shared videos, right? Those three things kind of come together. And looking at my package, it was more about the idea of giving back to the community and building interpersonal relationships, whether that was through interacting and serving my members in FBLA, or doing the canned food drive in student council and giving back to that community, or in the nonprofit organizations I was involved with. And that was, providing people with food, or providing people with literacy, or providing people with technological access. Everything one of those things revolved back to giving back to the community. So I want to encourage you guys to really think about what is the package that you guys want to have when you guys are applying to college. The last thing I'll say in high school, and that I would be remiss if I didn't say it, is that there's also a balance between getting your grades, but also, having fun and making the most out of your high school experience. And I would say that one of my regrets, looking back on my 4 years, is that sometimes I over prioritized my grades over my community and over my friends. I don't want to be mistaken, as in grades don't matter, because grades are the fundamentals, in my opinion. I think that, since we're on the topic of college applications, I'll be honest with you guys, if you don't have the high enough grades, it's probably not worth applying. Obviously, you'll hear stories about how someone has a 2.5 GPA and still got into Harvard or something like that. I think, in my opinion, it's a little different considering our race and our ethnicity and our background. In that, it sucks, but there is a real disadvantage sometimes being Asian American and being, applying for colleges. Everyone knows this. But at the same time, though, I don't think, your grades dictate everything. I have seen a lot of my friends who have focused solely on grades throughout high school, which has led to two detriments. One, they don't really build up the resume with extracurriculars, and they don't really have anything that stands out when they apply to colleges, because grades aren't enough to get into a top Ivy university. But B, they've missed out on a crucial part of college, which is building up the friendships and having those great conversations that will last you for almost a lifetime. And I was very fortunate to kind of recognize that probably halfway through high school. And I was, I realized, hey, this is not healthy. I'm getting burnt out. I feel lonely a lot of the times. I don't think I have any deeper relationships here. So it wasn't until second half of junior year when I really just wanted to shift that mindset and realize that, hey, life isn't just about numbers, and that these relationships and these conversations and the connections that we form is what's going to be important to us at the end of the day. So that's kind of my last kind of tidbit about high school that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's transition now into the college application process. My college application process can really be summed up, as a roller coaster. As in, there was a lot of highs and there was a lot of lows. The highs were mostly towards the end. Basically, the whole application process was a low. I think the problem I've seen is that a lot of people think college application starts senior year. I disagree with that. I think it really starts when you start high school. Maybe not freshman year, maybe that's too early, but I'm a huge believer in early preparation that makes all the difference. And I know a lot of friends who don't take the SAT until senior year. And senior year, your classes are probably the hardest classes you'll take in high school. B, you have to write your college essays. C, on top of all of that, you want to hang out with friends, but oh shoot, you have a SAT just around the corner that you haven't really studied for. So really try to knock out a lot of those standardized testings, a lot of just, building up relationships with teachers. I have so many friends who, it's a month before, the early application is due, and they're like, none of my teachers like me. Who am I going to ask for a teacher recommendations? And I'm like, man, well, that's kind of your fault, man. What? I don't know what to say. So yeah, be thinking about all these different factors, the standardized testing, the teacher recommendations, the essays, the interviews, all of those factors early on. Not everything you have to do freshman year, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a problem if you take a glance at it every now or then. Just see what are the criteria I need to fill out so that I'm not just trying to cram everything last minute. But I think with that said, the meat of the college application process probably started the summer before senior year. And that, for me, I did an internship in DC and I had a summer program at Yale at the time. But even then I recognized, hey, this summer is going to be a really important time and I don't want to waste that. So I didn't want to cram myself because I still wanted to focus on my internship and program. So what I did was that I just started drafting my common application. And for those of you who are juniors and seniors, you've probably heard of this. The common application is that main essay that you submit to every single college you apply to on Common App. And it is probably the most important essay, at least in my opinion, just because every single college asks for it. And while some Ivy colleges like Harvard, actually more like Yale and Stanford, actually Stanford's not an Ivy, good I said that, though they like to consider themselves an Ivy. But yeah, those two colleges, in Princeton too, they ask you like 10 supplemental questions. But other colleges like Cornell and Brown will ask you just one supplemental question because they really care about the Common App essay. That's kind of their main essay into discerning your personality. So I started that Common App over the summer, and I kept working on it all throughout that first semester. Like I think I did close to 15 to 20 different revisions. And ultimately, like I scrapped it after my early application phase, and I scrapped it again. And then I wrote different ones for different colleges, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm overcomplicating this. But that's all just to, you don't have to be like me, but I'm just saying that just to say that the common application is very tedious. It's very time consuming just because of how important it is. But that's why I recommend starting that over the summer, so that when the school year starts, you have ample time to make those revisions. You have a lot of times to reach out to your teachers or to counselors or to friends in college to make edits, to look over it and give you suggestions on what they think on, hey, does this common application essay really describe me well? So that's that essay. That starts probably the first thing. Heading into the school year, my next suggestion is to, and you could probably do this before the end of junior year if you're that close with your teacher, is that teacher recommendations should be the very next thing. And I say this for a couple of reasons. One, you need to give your teachers time to write those recommendations if you want a good letter, right? I know a couple friends who literally asked their teachers like a couple weeks before, like a week before. And sometimes if the teacher was nice, they'll say, yeah, but it's going to be really rushed. Or if the teacher's like, no, I don't have time. Like, you should have came to me before that. And that sucks. You know, that's something that's on you, right? That's something you could have prevented just by asking earlier. But the more important reason is that sometimes teachers only take a certain amount of applications or like recommendations to grades. The best example in my case was my AP chemistry teacher. She, we didn't know this until we asked her, but she has a rule that she won't write recommendations for more than, I think it was 8 or 9 people, maybe 10 people. But it was like first come, first serve. Even if you had a real solid relationship with her, if you were number 11, she would have said no. And I was like number 10. So I was like, clutch. But you know, you never know those rules. So that's why I would always say it's better to ask them as early as possible. Actually, my closest relationship was with my kind of my student government advisor / counselor / she taught me a leadership class once. So it's kind of like I knew her in so many different contexts, but I asked her like even towards the end of junior year, like that early on, because, and not that she was going to write the recommendation over summer. It was more so that I just put myself on her radar. So like I kind of like reserved the spot for myself. Again, just early preparation thinking. After teacher recommendations, that's just where you really got to start grinding out on your supplemental essays. And this is really just the core of the college app season. It's just taking the time to write a ton of supplements. Like Yale, Stanford, they had like 8 different essays. And they were like tricky prompts too. Like I remember Yale asked me like if he could meet any person dead or alive. Like, who would it be? What would be the conversation? What would you ask them? What would the day look like? Stanford was like, if you had an extra hour to the day, what would you do? And I'm like, who asked these questions? Like, what are these questions they're asking? But like, they're meant to make you think, and they're meant to, really show your personality and your creative side, but also just who you are as a person. But like, I hope for some of you that was like, oh gosh, like I don't know, what would I say to that? And hopefully that's an encouragement for you guys to realize, hey, these supplemental essays should not be started 2 days before the due date, which actually one of my friends did, and he still got accepted to all his colleges. But don't be like him. He's also kind of a genius. Anyways, so supplementals, start that as early as possible. And the last phase is really just filling in all your information and deciding which colleges you want to apply to. I guess that should be like early on in the stage of choosing, hey, like, what is my limitations? For me, I started out with like 12 colleges I wanted to apply to. I pivoted that and I applied to a lot more, which may or may not, looking back, have been the best decision. I guess for me, I did get a little freaked out when I didn't get into my early school, which was Yale. And I decided, hey, I'm just going to apply to as many colleges as I can at this point, which really burnt me out. And I realized afterwards wasn't necessary. So I guess like that's another thing to consider of what's a realistic number. A lot of people will tell you to have, 4 or 5 reach schools, a couple safeties, and a couple dream schools, they would say. So there's definitely numbers out there for that. The last part of the process is, actually before I get into the last part, early application stages, they're due generally around the start of November. Some are, mid-October, like I think Georgia Tech is. So you really got to be cognizant of, hey, like, when is this due? Make sure you don't miss the deadline. Again, early preparation helps. But also, the results for early applications come out like mid-December. Like, I think Stanford came out like 2 days ago. Harvard's coming out in 3 days. I don't know about Yale. I don't really care about Yale. Sorry. But yeah, so like, it's not a lot of time between now. And this is like, we're in the brunt of the season right now. This is the hardest season. So if there's any seniors here, I feel your pain, dog. Like, I was just there last year and it was not a great time. I think it was like tomorrow, a year ago from tomorrow, where I read that deferral from Yale in my car and I was just like heartbroken. But then I got over it because it's Yale. Just kidding. But yeah, so like from now until January 1st, which is when all the regular applications are due, like you have like, if maybe 2 weeks, right? And if you're applying for a lot of college from now until then, like this is like grind time. This is like the biggest, this is like when I was talking to my mom about this, I'm like, I'm just gonna, put sleep off for the next 2 weeks because I can sleep later on. But like these next 2 weeks is really gonna determine like the next 4 years of your lives and probably the future beyond that. But I know a lot of people who did like start writing those supplementals before the early application results came out, just like in preparation. If they're like, oh, if I get in, cool, I'm done. If I don't, I have kind of a head start again. Just another thing to remember. The last thing I will say is interviews. A lot of people think that after January 1st, you're done with college app. No, you're not. You're not done. It goes on for at least 2 more months, which, like it or not, you have to do it. You have to deal with it. Interviews were not as stressful as the 2 weeks before January 1st, but it was still pretty stressful. And it was like over a much longer period of time. So I did interviews with basically like nine colleges. I did it with, let me think, Georgetown, Brown, um, Harvard, UPenn, Princeton, um, Duke, Rice. I think those are the main ones that I remember off the top of my head. I did my Yale interview at the Yale summer camp. I did the year before, which looking back may be one of my regrets because like interview being a good interviewee is a skill. It's something that you really build up. Like I don't think not a lot of people are just natural at interviewing. Like there's definitely always something to improve on. When I did it the year before, I was just vastly underprepared. And I felt like that may be one of my reasons in not getting into accepted to Yale. But even during the regular season, what I noticed was that the first schools I interviewed with, I got deferred from, or I got waitlisted from. I think it was first Brown, and then it was Georgetown, and then every single school after that, like I got accepted to, which maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's not, but like for sure, like I still remember my Harvard, Princeton, UPenn like interviews, and they were my favorite ones. Not just because the interview went well, but I remember I had a great conversation with the person, with my interviewer, and I think that really translated. I don't know. I don't think it's a causation. Maybe it's more correlation, but I do think that interviews hold such an important weight. And I think that a big part of preparing for interviews is just there's only so much you can do in preparing for questions, just because how interviews work is that every single college will send their interviewers a set list of like 50 different questions. And then the interviewers will choose a couple that they want. So like there's really no way of preparing for every single one, but there are very common questions that you can basically always expect. Like, hey, like tell me about yourself. Why do you want to go to this college? Strengths and weaknesses. So basically my process was always to do some research on the college, did practice with, those common questions of tell me about yourself, and just practice a lot, practice, because practice makes perfect. And I did it in front of a mirror. I did it with my family. I did it with friends. But I did it to myself probably the most, just in my room, not this room, my own room. Because I really believe that delivery is just as important as your actual answer. Because I know a ton of my friends just have such interesting content to say, but because they weren't the most natural at that delivery part, the interviewers couldn't understand, and that really sucks. So that delivery part is really, really crucial. And there's more things you can do about, looking into the interviewer's background, searching them up on LinkedIn, preparing for questions to ask each college, etc. But I can talk more about the interview process if anyone has questions. Sorry, I went over time, but there's just so much more to say because the college app process is just very long, very tedious, but can also be really rewarding at the end and does really determine your life. But yeah, so Jason, I'll hand it back to you, facilitate the Q&A process.
All right, so thank you, Henry, for that. I think we can all attest to what Henry has said. As a high school student, you want to be, active and involved not only in high school but as a community-based level too. Put yourself out there. For example, clubs like FBLA or HOSA. Also, make sure you don't get burnt out and try to do everything. I think it's better to be good in a small amount of areas than mediocre in a large amount of areas. It's also really important in building networks. It's crucial to your high school experience. Make sure you don't procrastinate. I procrastinate a lot, so I got to make sure I get those teacher recs in at the end of junior year. But I think I'm going to open the Q&A session right now. So if you have any questions for Henry, just make sure you leave it in the chat box. I'll take Centesori 439. I think we can take maybe like 5 to 10, and then we can end the meeting there. So without further ado, you guys can, type your questions in and I can read them out to Henry. All right. So Helen wants to ask, what makes Harvard so special? Did you choose Harvard over other schools?
That's a good question. And I will preface that by saying, no, I did not like just choose Harvard based off the clout. I had a very, very long pros and cons list for all of my schools. And I talked to alumni and current students and even my interviewers from most of those schools. And I think ultimately my page was like 17 pages long of like trying to make a decision, which was just unnecessary and almost too long. But I took the process really seriously because I didn't want to just make the decision off of, oh, it's Harvard, I definitely need to go there. But I think at the end of the day, I just kind of went with my gut. I immediately connected with the students. So they have things called virtual visitas. Normally it'd be like in person, but there was like a lot of opportunities for you to connect with students like in your incoming class. And the couple guys and girls I met we just hit it off really, really great. And I think one of my main worries was just the people. And I thought, the stereotype of Harvard kids being like snobby and, a little bit arrogant sometimes. I didn't find that to be true at all. And I found that if anything, these were people who, I could tell were really deep and very sincere and genuine people. And, we had very long night conversations about, who we were, but also just about faith, about Christianity. And I felt ultimately that God was kind of calling me to go there.
The next question is from Erin. So she asks, would you say that Ivy schools are more beneficial for certain majors?
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely do more research on this online. But I think off the top of my head, I know Cornell has a hospitality school. It's called the Dyson. No, the Dyson's their business school. But one of my friends goes there and like, that's what they're known for. The hospitality and hotel management school. And that matters because it's harder to because it's more well known, it's much harder to get into that school for that major as opposed to applying for something else. Same thing with UPenn. The Wharton School of Business is definitely, on a different level than the rest of UPenn. And I think that matters when you apply on the common application, it will ask you which school are you applying to? And that kind of puts you in a different pool of applicants. And I struggled with that because my thought process was, what if I just take the easy way out and then say I'm applying as like, the normal UPenn school, like UPenn College. But then, that doesn't always work out because it's like some people try to transfer in to the Wharton School of Business, but like their acceptance rates for transfer is like way lower. It's like a 0.2% or something like that. But sometimes you just have to like rise up to the challenge and apply to, the major that you really want. And that's what I did. And very fortunately, I was accepted. But that was kind of my thought process, and that sometimes, you just have to take on the challenge head on.
Okay, so Tiff asks, what summer camp and interns have you attended?
So summer programs, I don't know how many of you guys are from Georgia, but there was one called 21st Century Leaders that I did the summer after my freshman year. Typically, they accept like rising juniors and rising seniors mostly, but it's never too late. It's never too early to apply, and I definitely lucked out with that process because I knew someone who did the program before. So that would be one of my recommendations. Highly recommend the Yale Young Global Scholars. That one is that's the one I attended last summer, and I just had a great time meeting people from, I think they have like 180 countries of people who go there. And it was just a great 2 weeks experience, but also just an experiencing, what it's like to be living on an Ivy League campus. being able to interact with professors and current students, and just a really great experience overall. Some other ones I would recommend that I didn't get to apply to included the TASP program. It has like a 5% acceptance, which is it's like almost like applying to colleges. That one is really famous. There's one at UPenn called something about like business leadership. I would search that up. That one is highly recommended and highly competitive. And the last one I would say is this Bank of America program called, actually, forgive me, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if you just search up Bank of America high school program, there's an internship there that's like also very, very prestigious to get into and hard to get into, sorry.
Okay, so Nicole asks, are there any benefits / drawbacks to taking the SAT subject tests / the essay?
That's a good question. So colleges will tell you they don't care. My personal philosophy is, why not? You know, why wouldn't you take it? And I say that for a bunch of reasons. Like, one, being an Asian American, you know, there's kind of a higher expectation internally, right? By college admissions. Number two, it could potentially seem like you're shying away from a challenge. That's just my personal opinion. This is all my personal opinion. You know, my thought process was like, I don't want to seem like I'm not trying. Like, I don't want to seem, I think the word there is challenged. Like, I don't want to seem like I'm shying away from the challenge by not taking it. And like, I don't want that to negatively influence my common application in any ways. And honestly, I don't know if it mattered or not, and I don't think I'll ever know. But like, my mindset in general was to not give college admission officers a reason to not admit me. Like, I don't want to leave them a weakness for them to be like, oh, you're out. Because I think, like, if I was a college admission officer, that's what I would be thinking. Because all the applicants are so great, I would be looking for flaws rather than reasons to admit them. Maybe that's not the best mindset, but that was my reason in taking it. But also, probably most importantly, just like, why not? Like, you're already studying so much for the SAT. What's this one extra thing going to like matter to you? You know?
Okay, so the next question is, what did you do to get yourself ready for the SAT?
I did a couple things. I did a couple practice books that were very, very helpful. The one I would recommend to all of you guys would be this one. So I think for a lot of, you know, Asian Americans, the reading section struggles a lot. I know for most people. So I did this one book called The Complete Guide to SAT Reading by Erica Meltzer. And it was just a very comprehensive book that offered a great breakdown of each of the skills that you needed to develop on the reading section. And it gave you like strategies that were really helpful for every single question type that it offered. And there was just overall just a ton of high quality, realistic passages that the author uses that were very similar to the ones I saw on the SAT. So I highly recommended that book. I don't recommend people they call it cold taking the SAT. I had a couple friends would be like, all right, let me just see where I'm at on the SAT, see which sections I need to improve on, just cold take it without any practice or material. I would say, I mean, maybe there's value in that. I never agree with it personally. I always thought, you know, practice makes perfect. So I guess last thing is just take as many practice tests as you can. I recommend Crack SAT. There's like hundreds of practice exams on there that I use, and some of it was on like a question by question basis, like types of questions. I did go to the Altop boot camp for a summer. The passages there weren't necessarily as realistic as the ones I found on Crack SAT or The Complete Guide to Reading by Erica Meltzer. But I think that just offered really good practice on what it's like to sit through like a whole exam. Basically, the boot camp was, I think, 3 days a week, 8 hours a day. You would take a whole exam, like reading, writing, math, essay, the whole morning. And in the afternoon, it got graded and you went over with the teacher what you got wrong. So it was like very fresh in your mind. And I found that a little helpful. And just like get into that mindset of sitting through the exam, because it's not easy to sit for like 4 hours.
So yeah, there's a lot of questions. So I'm sorry if I couldn't get all to them, but it's 4:47. I actually have a jazz band concert I have to attend to soon. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Henry or email, Instagram. I don't know, but whatever questions you have. Yeah.
I'm dropping my email. I'll just drop my email in the chat. If anyone wants to forward, I see there's a lot of questions. Sorry about that. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out on my email and I will respond.
So yeah, I think that will be the conclusion for the meeting.
Or one thing.
Oh yeah, Ben.
Oh yeah. So thank you for attending the meeting today. This meeting will be recorded and handed out on the various communication platforms. Just a reminder for Hooch Advisory. Additionally, next semester there will be another web seminar like this, with this time with one of the admissions officers from Georgia Tech, a retired admissions officer. So please try to attend them too. And a round of thanks for Henry for attending today and answering our questions.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for attending. See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.